number of people there. We also have that everything is open to the public. So because it's a nonprofit, anyone in the public can come out on the grounds and they can, a lot of people bring their dogs to, walk their dogs or run their dogs. A lot of people come just to see when we have Camp Collects, which is our powwow that happens the third weekend in July. A lot of people will come for that. We were closed for 2020 and 2021, but this past year in July, we had Camp Collects, which was an awesome experience because we had over 150 dancers and we had 15 big drums, which is more than we've ever had here before. So it was really a nice way to start the new, coming back to almost normal. But one of the things that I noticed is you guys were also supposed to read Beth Piatote's book on bead workers, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole thing was based on land, correct? It was
Yes.
your place, okay, a sense of place, sense of land. So one of the things that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk for a while, and then I'm gonna let you roam around so you can kind of see everything, and then we just by probably a little after 11:30, I'll probably round you up again and talk a little bit more because there's so much here to talk about. But the biggest thing that probably I want you to take away when you leave here is the word tamalwit. Tamalwit is a Nez Perce word that means the Creator's law. And the Creator's law has to do with reciprocity. So what is reciprocity? Who knows? What is reciprocity? If something is reciprocal, what does that mean? It means everybody wins. You give some, they give some, everybody works together. And that's how the Nez Perce, the Nimipu people looked at the land. The Creator's law said, if the land is taking care of you, then you need to take care of the land. One of the things that, if you continue to read on indigenous people, you will find out that kind of the white man's way, when he looks at land, he looks at it more as property. And he also thinks that he has rights because it's his property. But indigenous people don't look at the land as property. They're part of the land. And what they would say is not, I have rights, but I have obligations because of what they believe to the land. You have to understand, Nimipu people lived in this area, and I'll show you a map and you'll see some other maps here too, that for over 11,000 years. So all their ancestors are buried on these lands. All their sacred ceremonies were done here. They were able to work with the animals and the plants. I mean, the plants and animals knew them. When they're that long, I've talked with little kids and you ask them, how did the original Nez Perce people get medicine? How would you approach that? I mean, yes, even food, if you don't know the plants. So if you go up and you find plants, you're not going to go up to someone and say, oh, you know what, it's your turn this week. I'm really sorry, but we found this new plant, so you eat it and we'll watch you and then, kind of succumb to it. Of course, they're not going to do that. But they had people who were medicine people. And medicine people, over time, even from when they were very young, they knew, the elders knew who would be the right people, the right kids actually to grow up and become medicine people. And a lot of times when they went on their vision quest, some of them as young as 12, when they do their vision quest or a little bit older, they would come back and they were told something during that time that it was important for them to be able to communicate with the plant and become a medicine person. Fascinating story. If you go and start studying, there's a man named Stephen Buhner, B-U-H-N-E-R. And I had to write, I moved here 2 years ago from Northeastern California, and I worked with the Mountain Mighty people in Greenville. I moved here in 2020. Last year, in 2021, the whole town of Greenville burned down. We had, and I lived out 5 miles out in the valley, we had Indian Valley, and right down the street from where I lived had been an old boarding school. So I can talk to you for a long time about boarding school. But when I taught school, I did a mentor project for our teachers because there was very little information on the Mountain Mighty people. And there was an Indian center right close to our school, and after I retired from teaching in 2004, they hired me to do a TEK curriculum for them, which stands for Traditional Ecological Knowledge. And they wanted it from preschool to 6th grade. And the hardest part for me was they wanted me to use it all based on the California state teaching standards, right? And they're about this far away from each other when you talk about indigenous people's beliefs.
So
But because I wasn't writing it for the school district, I was writing it for the Indian Center, I could talk about that everything was alive. Every rock, every stream, everything was alive. Every blade of grass was alive. If you go and look at the science book for 4th and 5th grade, which I mostly taught, it'll say rocks are abiotic, which means they're not alive, right? So it was really fun for me to be able to write something based on indigenous wisdom. So when I got done with that, and unfortunately, the Indian Center burned down as well because they were in town in Greenville. I mean, so many, we lost almost everything, and luckily we had moved the year before. But the idea of what indigenous people all over the world really respect and honor is their land, because they're part of it. They never, ever thought that you could sell the land. Selling the land would be like rowing your boat out into the water and, you know, saying, okay, from the shore to here is mine, you know, or shooting an arrow up in the sky and saying wherever it goes this way, that's mine. I mean, they just could not fathom that. They thought white people were crazy. And the term for white people in Nez Perce is soyapo. And so it actually means people who come from the east. And even though they were the biggest kind of tribe, and believe me, the Nez Perce, it were like 12 different bands. It was not just one big tribe in Nez Perce. And when we had this place built, one of the things that happened afterwards is the American girl people, anyway, they did historical figures. So they did a historic Native American, and they picked Nez Perce. So when you walk around and you see our doll over here, her name is Kaya, and she represents, and they worked with the Nez Perce tribe up in Lapway to put these books together. There's all kinds of stories. We just got done, I don't suppose you guys are gonna go to the Josephi Center over in Joseph, but we have an Arts and Cultural Center over there. And we just got done making teacher boxes for all the 4th grade teachers in the valley, in Wallalla Valley, so that they have a Nez Perce box and they have information they can go to. And then I am picking one school a year and I work with them. So last year I did the Imnaha, the school.
What about how to raise her face?
And this year we'll do Wallalla. But this is a place where everybody can come. Everybody is welcome. Same with the grounds. It's not, quote, owned by anybody because it's a nonprofit. So there's no government affiliation or other organizations,
so
just the people on the board and working with local people. In fact, back in the early 90s, that's when they first started getting together, because there were enough people here in the town who thought, we have all these descendants of Chief Joseph's band, and his summer home was right down the road from here. When you go over to the homeland, a little bit farther, a couple miles farther down the road, is where he had his summer camp. And it was where the Glostine and Wallalla River come together. Because what two things do you have to have if you're living off the land to survive?
Water and food.
Water and food, okay, but one other thing, because I kind of put those together.
Medicine?
You have to have wood for fires. You have to have something to be able to burn. So you're going to find that all their village sites are near water and they're near trees. Okay, they didn't cut down trees, but they sure picked up a lot of wood. And I could talk to you for a long time about all the things the women did, because they collected the wood, they collected the water, they, So anyway, so Tumawit is the Creator's Law. They were based on where their food was. That's why they had to roam around. It could not just be in one little place. They were not farmers. So they had a seasonal round. They didn't have that. We've done, over the years, people have developed a seasonal round to be able to explain how and when the Mipu people would get their food. There is a first food ceremony that is done when they have big ceremonies. So last Sunday we had a service over in the Longhouse. The original Nez Perce kind of religion was the Seven Drums religion, and they still do that at the Longhouse. And so I went, and afterwards, after the ceremony, which was like 3 hours long, then they had a first foods gathering, and what they do is they put bowls of food all down your table, and everybody waits, and the man in charge is talking in Nez Perce, and luckily I know a few Nez Perce words so I could understand some of what he said. But back in the time when the Nimipu people were first created, the creator asked what animals, because the other animals were already here before people got here.
Yeah.
And they said, what animals are willing to help this new creature? And the first one that spoke up was salmon. So when you do a first foods sit-down gathering, and you have all these bowls, the first bowl, everybody first starts with water, because water is life. All of us have to have water. Every living thing has to have water. So you take a little drink of water, and then you eat some salmon, just a little bit. And the next one that said, I'll give my body, were deer. So then you eat venison. So there's salmon, then venison. It kind of works like elevation as well. So we started under the water, and then we get up to the land, and there's deer, right, in this, okay? And then we go to the roots, because the roots were willing to help as well. And the roots that were mostly eaten were camas, and there's a nice picture. Where's our picture of camas? Yeah. Anyway, camas was the little blue flower. This is actually cows. There's a picture of it there. Or no, that's cows. So we have cows, and we have camas, and we have even bitterroot. And so on the table, and it was the first time I had ever done this, so I didn't even know what I was pretty sure what camas was.
So like Ginger, was this food cooked or was it raw, or can you tell us?
You know, it was interesting because there were only a few people there, and I asked the lady next to her, so what is all of this stuff right here?
Yeah.
And the first one was kind of stringy, and it was bitterroot. And it was kind of, it didn't taste terribly good to me.
Yeah.
And on our side, they talk about camas tasting a little bit like chocolate. Well, the next one was camas. And it was, but when it's cooked in the ground is because it's a root, and so is cows, Kouse, okay? And so, and bitterroot, of course, is also a root. But first they had bitterroot, then they had camas, and they had cows. And cows wasn't too bad. But then after that, then it goes up, you're higher in elevation, and then you get to berries. So the first berries that were in the bowl, I'm pretty sure were choke cherries. They had a real big pit, and they weren't so too bad. But then they had huckleberries, lots of huckleberries. And huckleberries, if you haven't had huckleberries, they're really good. Okay, and after you do that, then you have water again to show your thanks to all the foods that you just tasted. And then in their prayers, and then everybody just eats. You know, you pass all the bowls around and everybody eats whatever. And plus there were other things that people brought. But everything goes back to when the Creator gave the people this land and put them on this land. They were part of the land. They never understood when the white people came what they meant about property and how you could put a flag over here and a flag over there and say it was yours. And when they offered the native people money, it was like, they couldn't get it. It was like, you don't understand. You don't even think about buying land. The Creator would be upset if you bought the land. And everything they did, their religion was in the land. So you can't, I read a story where this one native elder said, your religion you can put in a box and you can take it wherever you go. But not for us. Our religion is in the land. So to move them off of the land where everything is sacred, that in itself was a terrible thing to do to these people, anywhere in the whole world, to remove indigenous people from their land. So that's very important. The seasonal round will help you understand where and when they got their food. So when you start in the spring and as you go around, and of course these 4 are our seasons, and all the other words are the names for their time of the year, or they're kind of like seasons, but there's like 16 of them.
Wow.
But they tell you what happens during that time. It's a time, this one says, the season of the fetus in the womb of deer and elk when hunting is finished and the meat tastes gamey and is unfit to eat. So you're not going to kill. They had a lot of understandings and kind of like rules that you don't do certain things at a certain time, or like when you're hunting, the people, everyone is respectful. And I know for the Mount Mighty people, when I lived with them, they had like rules where if men were out hunting, you didn't let the kids run around and jump and be disrespectful. You did not, if some woman was cooking or, even for burning acorns down there, you didn't go and bother them and make them get angry. Everything had to be in a certain way. So that, and I want you to look at this, and if you want to take pictures, you can. This is made of clay. And when you look at it, this is one of the most fantastic works of art I've ever seen. If you look at the antlers where the elk are fighting down here, and the life cycle of the salmon, this is all made of clay. Wow. The same person who made this also made this kind of like relief map that's right here, and it shows where the topography of the land is, so it's really a good way to do that. So you're not going to all be able to see this, but this little circled area and behind that red door, there's a bigger map that shows the area where the Nez Perce live. They live here in Oregon, parts of Washington, parts of Idaho, and like I said, there were bands, okay? So, the kinds of homes they lived in,
teepees?
They had tule mats for their coverings of their teepees. The tule mats were made just like what is over the window here. A lot of people come in and they go, how could they have that in the wintertime? They would get wet, look at the air come through, but in the wintertime they would swell up and they would close. And you have to remember that all around the inside of their teepees, whether it was in the summer or winter, they had a liner. And then they put all their stuff in front of it as well. But that's how they lived for a long time, okay? And you can go up and kind of see plus that's really light and be really easy to carry. Once they got horses in about 1730, that's when they started going east, and that's when they started hunting the big buffalo. We actually had buffalo here, and someone, either I read it or someone told me that supposedly old Chief Joseph was the one who killed the last buffalo that lived in these parts. Do you understand that there are two Josephs? There's an old Joseph, two Etkakos or two Etkakis, depending what you read. And then there's young Chief Joseph, him and two Yalakek. And he's the one who took part in what was called the war, which really wasn't a war. It was more of a flight. And so I'm going to put these pictures out, but you can look at these. The very first picture of young Chief Joseph was taken in 1877, right after, quote, the war was over. This was taken in October. The second picture here is a month later in November of 1877. This is the picture that's on our local paper. Our local newspaper here is called the Chieftain. And so this is a picture that's on every one of our papers. And then these two pictures are taken in 1903, which is a year before Chief Joseph died. Chief Joseph died in front of his teepee. He just kind of keeled over one day up in Espelum, up in the Colville Reservation. And so what the doctor wrote on his papers, on his death certificate, was that he died of a broken heart.
Aww.
Do all of you know this story kind of the flight of the Nez Perce having to leave here? Back in the day, what happens, they're living here 11,000 years, okay? 1855, 1836, let's go there. The missionaries first come in 1836. Whitman, of course, Marcus Whitman, he goes over to Walla area with Narcissa, and they're dealing mostly with the Cayuse Indians, okay? So Henry Spalding goes over to Idaho, where he starts Christianizing Indians in the Lapway area. And Spalding was kind of a not so nice guy, and he was really strict and everything, and he even would whip the people who did not do what he said to do, so he wasn't liked as well. His wife was, however, Eliza, because she was the only one of all four of them that learned to speak the Nez Perce language, and she also would invite the native people into her home. Narcissa Whitman, no way, she did not want anybody in her home, okay? So, very different kind of people in a way, but the natives had heard about these missionaries that came up in 1836, and they wanted to know if they knew something about the Creator that they didn't know. Then it's like, well, tell me, don't make me give up my religion, but tell me what you know, because maybe I'll have a better understanding of the Creator. So there were 2 Nez Perce men, even before Whitman and Spalding came, that actually went with some fur traders back to St. Louis to ask about sending someone to come out that could talk to them about more about the Creator, this little black book they seem to carry around. And so, of course, once all the ministers back east heard that, it's like, oh, well, we can go out there and we can, Christianize all these heathen Indians and everything. So 1836, they come out. 1839, old Joseph takes his boys and he goes up to Lapway because he wants to check all this out. And he's kind of impressed. They seem to be pretty powerful. Once Spalding, of course, is Christianizing everyone. He wants them to cut their hair. He wants them to wear white men's clothes, and he wants them to kind of be farmers. Well, Joseph wasn't interested in that, but he was interested in that black book, and he says he would like to be part of that, but don't take away his religion. But then Spalding said, well, let me baptize you. So old Chief Joseph was one of the first 2 men, Nez Perce men, that were baptized in 1839. And then he comes back to Wallalla and lives life normal. But then more settlers come up. So the Oregon Trail, and I realize this is kind of I'll put these out and you guys kind of look at them if you want. In 1855, there are so many white people now that are starting to come up. In 1840s was the Oregon Trail. They came right up through the Grand, went up towards the Willamette Valley. Didn't want to come over the Wallalla Mountains because by then they were tired. A lot of their animals had died. They wanted no anything that got worse, right? They already had the Blue Mountains they were going to have to go over, but they didn't come over the Wallalla Mountains. So nobody came here back in the 1860s and 1850s. And so we have all of these people going off. Well, 1855, some of them had dropped off. It's like, okay, I've gone far enough. This looks pretty good to me. Maybe we can stay here and make a place. But they started hearing about skirmishes with other Indian tribes, with white settlers, and they started getting worried because there were a lot of Indians around, and they thought maybe that was going to happen to them. So they contacted the government, and of course the government contacts the military. So the military gets together and they go, we've got to get all these people on reservations. We've got to make sure that these people can be in one place and we know where they all are. So they call a council. They tell all the Indians in this area, a council and in Walla Walla. So there's like 50 or 60 soldiers and government officials and interpreters and all this. And they have this all set up and they have a little covering and they have food and for a bunch of the chiefs. Well, word gets out to the Indians and they want to know what's going on because the council to them means how are we all going to get along, right? So now that we're all living kind of close to each other. So they show up in 1855, 5,000 Indians show up on horseback, all in their regalia, so can you imagine these 50 or 60 Soyapo guys, and they're going, because half of them are Nez Perce. So 2,500 Nez Perce, they were probably the largest and strongest tribe all over in this area. So they sit down and they talk. Well, the white man, I'm sure they go, boy, we better make this good or we won't be here tomorrow. So they say to the Indians, we want you to go on what we call a reservation, which is reserved just for you. White people out, it's just your land. They can go all around. And so their talk goes pretty well, and old Chief Joseph is the 3rd man to sign this treaty of 1854. So they go back to Wallalla, because it includes Wallalla Lake, it includes Wallalla and Joseph, and it includes like the Amnaha Canyon, places where they would go in the wintertime to get away from the hard weather that we had up here. So 5 years later, in 1860, gold is discovered in Orofino. 15,000 miners come and start trespassing on this newly made reservation, supposedly. And the Indians complain, but there are not enough soldiers to really keep all these miners out. The miners dirty up the streams. All of a sudden, Nez Perce horses start disappearing, and I'm sure some of the women had some incidents happen to them as well. Things start happening, and it starts getting worse, and more settlers keep coming in. And of course, Whitman, he really wants settlers to come in because he'd like to fill up this whole area where he is. So then by 1863, 3 years later, the government says, we need to get them on this reservation, and you know what, we need to have control of these people. And gold, since it was discovered up here in Orofino, in this little red area, most of the gold was taken out of there, so that's where Spalding was, and all those Christianized Indians. And so now what happens is, they call this council again, only this time it's in Lapway. And here's Chief Joseph, old Chief Joseph, he comes with his boys, and they say, we want you to go on this much land. All the bands of Nez Perce, Joseph spanned over 2,000 horses, and by then they had cattle. There's no way they're all gonna wanna be in this little area. They need this big area to get the roots, get to hunting and fishing. They don't wanna be farmers, they don't wanna cut up the earth. So what happens? 5 of the bands say, there's no way we're gonna do this, and they won't sign the treaty. Old Chief Joseph is standing there, and Spalding actually comes up to him and goes, come on, you know, sign this treaty. And Joseph turns around and he says, you stick with spiritual law. Don't you tell me what to do with this land. And he throws his Bible down, he turns around, he goes, I'm going back to my old religion, and he leaves. So those become the non-treaty Indians. When you hear about the non-treaty, it's the ones who did not sign the 1863 treaty. There are lawyers today that are working to prove that this thief treaty, what the Indians called it, or liars treaty, it's no good. Because what happened was the government wanted one Nez Perce to sign for all of them, and you couldn't do that. Every band had their own chief. But there was a Christianized Indian that was there, he goes, I'll sign. Because they all went up to him, they go, I'll give you extra, you know, whatever, food, blankets, I'll give you a wooden house. I mean, and so he signs this, and of course the government go, oh, we got our signature. So they figured it was a done deal. So after that, so that creates a big problem. Then we have several Indian men who end up getting killed. One of them, his son takes revenge on some settlers, kills some settlers, and the war is on. So you have to understand, 1877 in June, they're supposed to move out in 30 days. They've got 2,000 horses all over. They've got old people, women and children. And in 1871, I forgot to say, but old Chief Joseph dies in 1871, and young Chief Joseph takes over. So him and Tuyalaka, the handsome guy, over 6 feet tall, and his brother Olakot, who was a war chief, is even taller. So he takes over, and he promises his father he'll never sell this land, never have bloodshed in the Wallalla Valley. And when General Howard comes in and he says, you have 30 days to get out or I'm gonna move you, I'll bring my soldiers in. Joseph is a camp chief, he's not a war chief, and he's supposed to keep peace, he's supposed to take care of his people. He knows if there's a war, women and children will die. So he says, yes, okay, I'm gonna move, and they start moving out. And while they're on their way to the reservation, that's when this young kid and his 2 cousins go and kill some settlers to avenge the death of his father, who had done nothing to be killed. And that's another reason that started the war. So what I'm gonna do, you're welcome to look at all these pictures. There's a map if you're interested in the flight or the war of 1877. But you have to remember, the year before 1877 was the Custer battlefield. And that was the Sioux and the Cheyenne against the soldiers in Custer. All of Custer's men, including him, of course, were killed. And they mutilated the bodies really bad.
Oh,
and so
it's horrible.
It was, but so the soldiers, so, you know, when he gets back to talking about all the soldiers, the government goes, there is no way we are going to let Joseph, because I keep thinking Joseph's in charge, and he's not, he's just a camp chief. But Howard knew him, so, and he was kind of the last man standing when the war was over and the surrender happened. What you can read up there on the side, it says, I didn't surrender. Miles told me, Colonel Miles said that we'll just all go and then we stay for the winter in this one place, and then we get to go back. But you know who was in charge of this military back in those days? Sherman. Do any of you know about the Civil War? What did Sherman do during the Civil War to take over the South? He burned every house and killed every farm animal to make sure these people had nothing. okay? And he said, that's what's gonna happen with these Nez Perce. We are gonna make an issue of them. Joseph will never get to go back to here, to the Wallallas, and we are going to put them far away. And that's exactly what they did. Joseph did come back here in 1899 and in 1900 with an interpreter with some of the Indian agents. He had money in his pocket to buy a piece of land. All he wanted was to be buried here where his parents were buried and all his ancestors were buried. And they went into Enterprise and over 200 people signed a petition saying, we don't want any dirty Indians living around here. And when he gave a talk and he spoke from his heart, talked about how this land was so important to him and why the land was everything, people made fun of him.
That's
And
so
even
mean.
The local paper talked about them mocking him when he talked. So the whole story is very sad. I have some wonderful books I can show you if you're interested in learning more about him or any indigenous people here. But yeah, there's pamphlets over there if you're interested in learning about. They're done by several different organizations besides the national parks and the Forest Service in the tribe. So that will tell. There's things over in the back corner, some pamphlets there. There's things here that you can see. That table has touch and feel. I'll turn my music back on because we're not. But if you have any questions, please ask me. So we have about 15 minutes or so to roam around, and then I'll kind of wrap it up, and then we'll walk over to the dance hall. Okay, any questions? Okay, my name's Ginger, so come track me
I have
down.
a question.
Yes, sir.
Did the camas taste like chocolate?
No. And it wasn't cooked in the ground. You could tell because there was kind of a sauce like in it. It wasn't real bad, like the bitter root stuff. But yeah, you know, it's like you gotta try it, right? I mean, you know. So yeah, let me go turn on my music and you guys can roll
I
around.
wanted to see if you wanted to feel more of this one that's behind us. Because right over here on your right hand side, there are a few other things. Sorry. There are like, this is like supposed to be cooked salmon. Just kind of showing like their site.
Okay.
And where how they
What is this thing?
That is a basket and it has like leaves in it.
Oh.
Were these their shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that actually looks, I think it's a sleeping hammock.
Oh.
That's like attached to the horse. And then Miguel, I'm gonna grab your hand because there is a teepee here and I want you to feel it.
Oh, wow. I learned a lot. So when I went to Mexico, I have a friend, and he was teaching me a little bit about the Mayan culture. And it was just so interesting, and I got to do like a cleansing ritual with him,
Oh, that's so awesome.
and in the ocean.
That's so cool.
It was like the most healing thing I've ever done in my life. Like
Oh,
I cried. It was just
That's so awesome.
amazing.
So these are like the sticks that she was kind of talking about where it like, in the winter, it
Yeah.
will expand and like give them insulation almost. And then there's also, I'm gonna guide your hand. There is like the wool.
Wow.
That was kind of like, you know, the bottom of their teepees.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how deep it goes in there, but yeah, I wanted you to experience that.
So they did it, they had their vision question, they stayed in the White House for a long time.
This is so cool. I'm just trying not to like touch it too fully because I know this is like super sacred to them. So.
That's just like a little campfire kind of scent that they.
Yes, yes, and you know, for anybody, because it's so hard.
And then actually at this back window here, so you're gonna walk straight, and then go ahead and take a turn right here, and then right in front of you there's a lamp. But if you reach out farther, I'm gonna scoot you over. There is the sticks, like these are the actual ones that she was talking about.
okay. These are so interesting. Uh-oh. I don't want
It's
to.
okay. It's okay. It didn't break. Okay, and then you're just gonna turn right around, and there's a headdress here that I think you'll want to feel. So right in front of you, there's a display, so don't walk any farther. And there are horns on this as well, so if you feel towards the back of the head. And then there's a fur on here as well, so I'm just gonna guide your hand. So there's a fur and a couple of feathers. And then I'm gonna read this to you actually. It says, this buffalo headdress with ermine trailers is an example of the Nez Perce reverence for animals in ceremony and regalia. Because an animal died in order to offer its body to make to the people, careful craftsmanship and decoration honors the sacrifices of the animal.
I love learning about history. It's like so fascinating.
I know, it's really cool. Over here, there is something in a case, so we can't touch this one, but it's a painted drum, and so it's like the hide pulled over, and it's painted, and it was designed by the Umatilla artist Ellen Taylor. The piece was featured by the Caucus, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, committee in 2009. And so it is a drum and it has a painting of a man, an Indian man on it. And then there is a staff that's probably like 7 or 8 feet tall.
Wow. Inside of it?
It's just standing in this casing as well.
Okay.
The casing is probably like 9 feet high.
Wow.
And the staff is next to it in the casing. But I think it was like a staff with a dancing staff.
Wow. Interesting.
Get off here.
So there are a couple display cases that you can come up against. And then Ryan is right in front of you.
I'm backing out. Yeah, that's me.
Did you want me to read some of the clay seasons to you? So in the middle, if you want to feel this, I'm sure that that's okay.
It's made out of clay.
Yeah. So it's up here and it's on the wall. So just be really gentle because I'm not sure like what the integrity is on this thing. So in the middle, this is a huge circle. In the middle it says, we learn a lot of lessons from watching animals. The salmon are one of our best teachers. We learn from them that we have to do certain things by the seasons. We watch the salmon as smolts going to the ocean and observe them returning home. We see the many obstacles that they have to overcome. We see them fulfill the circle of life just as we must do. If the salmon aren't here, the circle becomes broken and we all suffer. And that was said by Leroy Seth. So in this circle, I read to you what was in the middle. And then there are 4 different pictures that represent our seasons that we know. So winter, spring, summer, and fall. And in each of those paintings, there are like nature kind of guides to what that season looks like. So spring has flowers and brighter colors and things like that, whereas winter has more barren leaves and things like that. I cannot pronounce the words of these seasons, but so I'll read you the descriptions.
Okay.
But one of them says the season of shedding leaves when cold weather and snow arrive in higher elevations. Another one says the time when the Chinook salmon return to upper rivers, ready to journey to spawning streams. And she said there's like 16, so I'll just read one from like each kind of like corner. This one says the season for baking loaves of ground kawas to store for winter. And then another one says the time for migrating to higher elevations to dig roots, the time when syringa blooms and the male deer are fit to hunt in the mountains. So just kind of like a lot more in depth than what we experience for our seasons, for sure.
But they make so much sense.
It does make a lot of sense,
Yeah.
right? And then I'll kind of go through here. There are a lot of things just kind of in the middle of the room here, so I'm trying to make sure that you don't run into anything. This is a touching table, so if you would like to, so you're gonna come more towards me, and then I'm gonna put you right in front of this table. This is a touching table. I can hold your phone if you'd like, so you can use both hands. So these are braided, I'm not sure, kind of like,
I would love to learn how to make these. This would be so cool to make.
I'm not sure what they are made of.
What is this thing?
That is a horn. So actually, if you go all the way back, that is a horn, and it's almost the same size, maybe a tiny bit bigger than the horn that I explained to you earlier.
Yeah.
But this one is not in near good as condition. I think that's supposed to represent a bone.
Okay.
And then we have some beading here. And these seem to be like traditional beading. It's a necklace.
I know someone who knows how to make these. These are so cool.
The next thing that you'll touch over here, just a little bit more, is right here is leather. And if you feel up towards the top of it, the bottom is where we're at right now. So that right there is an axe, like a stone axe. And then actually here, I'll guide you over here. This is the end of a leather piece, but it goes into a huge feather, like almost an entire wing of an animal.
That's beautiful. What color is that one?
This is kind of a dark gray black, and then lighter gray as it gets to the base. And then we have a pelt here. I'm not sure what kind of animal it is, but it's a fur. It almost looks like a coyote, but it feels obviously very soft. And then we'll come around this way, and I don't want you to trip, but right in front of us there's a huge teepee. Like, not huge, but one of us could probably crawl into it if we really wanted to.
What is it?
A teepee.
A teepee.
And I'll take you kind of to the corner to it,
Yeah.
but we can't like really get inside of it, but I'll let you kind of come over here, and you're gonna like lean forward a little bit, so I'll just kind of guide your hand. So that's just the side of it. There's like not a whole lot of other texture here.
What's inside of it?
Just a fur on the ground, and you're gonna step over it here. It's not too high off the ground.
Okay.
And then over here is one of the maps that they were talking about. And if I can find what map I think it's a map of the flights that she was talking about.
Okay.
Where it kind of explains like the battles that happened and things like that. So there's a timeline here, and I'll read it to you. It says the first one is June 17th, and it's the battle at Whitebird Canyon. The second battle is June 16th through the 28th at Lolo Pass. July 29th to August 8th is the peace in the Bitterroot Valley. And then August 9th through 10th is the attack at, I'm not going to be able to say that, but in English it's Big Hole. Attack at Big Hole. August 20th was Camas Meadow Raid. August 23rd through 26th is the Yellowstone Raids. September 7th through 11th is the Evasion at Clark's Fork Canyon. And then September 31st to October 5th is the Siege at Bear.
Okay. Wow.
And then,
This is so sad.
I know, it's so hard to like even think about.
I took a Native American history class, and I remember writing about a lot of these things, and it's sad that in American history none of this is taught, the reality of what truly happened to all these.
So this is
nations.
a headdress. So the bottom part is what you just touched. It's very, very soft, but these are pelts.
Gorgeous.
Animals.
This is gorgeous.
So there's actually some really awesome beading up here that I want you to experience.
Wow.
So that's like the headband portion of it. It's red, white, and blue beading, and some triangular patterns. And then there are feathers up at the top. So I'll bring your hand. Yep, right over there. There's feathers, and they just go all the way back.
Wow. Patterns. I love the different texture patterns in this one.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. And then I'm gonna have you kind of turn. We're gonna turn this way because there is a touch mat. So we're gonna one more step forward, and then put your hand down. And this is a touch mat. And it actually goes a little bit farther too forward. Yeah, if you wanna go around it, you absolutely are. So on this touch map, there are actually blue lines and to show where the rivers are and all these like small water areas.
Yeah.
And then there's a white dotted line that goes along a path that I'm assuming they probably took. And it's very like treacherous, almost like where your hand is right now.
Yeah.
That's like some probably I would assume really treacherous like terrain.
Yeah, that would be hard to get
And that
through.
where your finger is actually part of their trek that they did, which is just so crazy.
Yeah. You know, they didn't have Google Maps or anything, you know? So
No.
a lot of them like figuring out as you go. Wow. Definitely pay my respects, you know, to all the nations that lived here and everyone that had to deal with those harsh.
Okay, so right in front of us, we're standing in front of a statue. This is kind of a tight spot, so we're going to stay right here for a second.
Okay.
So we're standing in front of a statue, and behind the statue is a blanket with Native Americans on horses. And it's just a silhouette, so there are shadows with a beautiful scenery, like orange and mountainous background. And then the statue in front of it is a Native American man riding a horse with a flag in hand and a shield on his other arm.
Wow.
And he has a headdress on that has horns. So it makes me kind of feel like he's in charge of something, right?
Yeah.
Like he looks like he's ready to go to battle. And this area is actually really tight, so I'm gonna have us kind of turn around. Great. And over here, there are a ton of photos here, and they're all of the Native American men and their families. There are like refugees. It has some history about their lives.
Yeah.
And I'll read this one actually. It's a little bit pretty cool because it's a photo of one of their teepees. Yep. So it's a photo of one of their teepees, and it's Joseph's winter camp. So it says the Joseph band of Nez Perce often lived along the banks of Nesplem Creek near the Colville Agency's offices. Joseph did not live in the cabin provided to him, choosing his teepee instead. So it sounds like he made a teepee instead of living in one of the homes that they tried to provide for him. But there are some really interesting, and all of these photos, obviously, aside from a couple, are like black and white or kind of like a older style photo. And then you can come forward. There's room here for you. And then right in front of us here is like a timeline of all sorts of things, the history and culture of the Nez Perce. And so I'll actually read this. Some of it is not in English.
Okay.
But I'll read this portion of this part is in English, so I'll read it to you. It says, in 1990, a handful of Wallalla citizens and Nez Perce residents began developing an idea to bring together present-day inhabitants of Wallalla and the descendants of the Wallalla band Nez Perce. The first powwow and feast was held at the Wallalla School Gymnasium. It was a monumental event of reunion for the dispersed Nez Perce and a celebration for all. In 1998, thanks to the continued efforts of volunteers and generous donors, we moved our present site at the Nez Perce Wallalla homeland grounds and renamed the event after the place, Calix, from where you can see the mountains. Growing out of the success of the annual celebration, the nonprofit Nez Perce Wallalla Homeland was formed. The mission of the organization is to secure, develop, and manage real property and related assets to enhance and enrich the relationships among the descendants of indigenous people and the contemporary inhabitants of the Wallalla Valley, to create a physical place to build these relationships and to preserve and celebrate the culture of the indigenous inhabitants and to educate the general public on the history of the area. Today, Nez Perce Wallalla Homeland owns and manages the 320-acre parcel adjacent to the city of Wallalla along the Wallalla River.
Oh wow.
So I think it's the history of this place, actually, which is really awesome. And it's their timeline. It goes from 1989 until, and this one it goes up to 2017. From their start to, I guess, 2017, which is probably the last time it was updated.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. It talks about where they have started out, from a gymnasium to, where we are now, where they're able to be this resource.
Yeah.
Was there anything that really caught your eye?
It was also interesting. I was just fascinated by everything else.
Yeah, was there anything that you wanted to hear more about?
We can keep on walking. You see.
Okay,
Or-
yeah, well, we've kind of like gone through every
whole thing?
little section. It's got a lot of, information,
Yeah.
and there are like the touch stations that kind of take up some of that room. But yeah, is there anything that you wanted to go back to or that you wanted to experience again?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
I can read some more of these descriptions to you if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go this way. There's no one over here, so it's a little less tight. So these are pictures, and there's one with a woman, and she is just sitting with a blanket.
Yeah. Oh.
The last thing that I have to say is,
Walk straight.
please be kind. One of the things that especially when I talked to little kids about Chief Joseph was a very kind man. He was a camp chief. He was totally in it for the people in his community and for making sure that it was a peaceful existence, okay? And all of you are in that point in your life where you're gonna have to make a lot of different choices. And I just really hope that you guys choose a peaceful direction and you also choose one that is very compassionate and kind. I think that's what's gonna help our world move forward no matter who you are or where you live. And please be a good role model to anyone younger than yourself because these days they really need some good role models. So gather your stuff up and we will walk you down to the bridge and let you head for all of the other parts of your group.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
there's a little bit of a crowd just kind of trying to exit, so I'm gonna walk you slowly.
I'm gonna stand here and give it like a salute to the page of respects.
Okay. Is there somewhere specific that you'd like to do?
Should we do it outside?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's do it outside.
So that crowd is kind of gone now, so we're good.
Okay.
And then we're entering our doorway, and there's a little lip on the ground. So
Okay.
there you go. You're over it.
Flight of the Nez first.
So we're gonna. I'll turn you around and have you
Okay.
like face the. Would you like to face the building?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So just a little more. Now you're facing.
Okay.
We got everybody.